Kindness is not a hard sell. It's a lot like gratitude. When we start to feel it, when we understand the whole concept of gratitude, then we feel a whole lot closer to it, and it's not that difficult for us to, it shouldn't be that difficult for us to adopt. But kindness, I'd like to say that people are hungry for kindness. The fact of the matter is people are starving for kindness. In the world that we live in today and the challenges that many of us are facing on a day in, day out basis.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Sparks of Gratitude podcast. I am your host, Randy Sparks, and today we have an amazing guest. You know that we believe that gratitude can change and save lives, and it begins with yourself. And we have Curtis Bennett here to share some of his life experience, wisdom, and the current mission that he's on. Welcome, Curtis.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here.
Well, I'm so excited about this because in the last few months, I have had several people tell me, wow, Randy, you're doing this podcast. You know who you should meet? Curtis Bennett. And there's been more than one. And I've heard so much about you. And then since then, we've had a chance to have a few conversations. And I am so impressed with the mission that you're working on. Curtis currently is the executive director of One Kind Act a Day. You can find them at, what's your website?
thepowerofkind.org.
There you go. And we are excited because we get to learn about, well, what is the purpose, what's the mission of One Kind Act a Day, and how you're taking part in that, why that's so meaningful to you. And then in your life, what has led you to this point? Well, Curtis, maybe to start, what is getting you excited this morning?
Well, I'll tell you what, the first thing that I would say is I applaud what you're doing. I'm a big gratitude fan. And I think gratitude is one of the most important values that we can display. And it's something that I think we need to be a little bit better at on a day in, day out basis. So I applaud what you're doing. I really like this whole concept. I like the thought that you've got that where it says that it can change and save lives. Because I feel the very same way about kindness. But what's got me excited about today is every single day I get to go out and just spread kindness. It doesn't matter if I'm in a school or if I'm talking with somebody at their place of business. We speak to a lot of religious organizations, even in the political space, where people think that kindness is now a lost art and there's no way that we're going to be able to ever rescue the political space from the kindness deficit that we're experiencing. You know, we enjoy the fact that we get to do that, and every day we get to approach that. So I usually have a very good day every day. And when I go home from work, my wife says, "How was your day at work?" And you better say it was a great day, because it was. So every day is a good day for us.
Well, when your mission is to create habits of daily kindness, how could it not be?
Right. And we get to see and we get to be a part of, as I'm sure you are, of the daily stories that come in and that we get to experience with people when we see these incredibly heartwarming circumstances where kindness has changed and even saved a life. And so we get to experience this every day.
Wow. Well, I hope we get to hear some of those instances, maybe from experiences, stories that have come in through your work, and as well, those that you've experienced in your life with your own family. Could you tell us a little bit about this organization and what would be helpful for our listeners to know?
Absolutely. And thank you. So One Kind Act a Day began in April of 2022. There's a successful businessman in Salt Lake City. His name is Khosrow Semnani. He's the founder of our organization, and he is the chairman of the Semnani Family Foundation. At the peak of COVID, when COVID was being weaponized, when politics was being weaponized, and people were afraid, and they were looting in the streets, and they were rioting, and all sorts of different challenges were going on. One individual, and it happened to be at this particular instance, Khosrow Semnani, said to himself, we've got to do something. And what I really like about this whole concept is when one person can say, we've got to do something and I'm willing to do it. Similar to what you're doing. But when someone says something needs to be done and then they look around and they say, who's going to do it? No, in this particular regard, he said, I'm going to do something about this. And so he talked to a number of friends. He talked to a lot of different business leaders and political leaders and came up with this whole concept of one kind act a day. What would happen if we could get people to deliberately consider, okay, I'm going to perform at least one single act of kindness today. And the beauty about this is kindness is like a stone in a pond. It has a ripple effect. We've all heard about the butterfly effect. And what is the calculation? When does an act of kindness, ultimately wear out? And the fact of the matter is, it's incalculable. We don't know how far one single act of kindness will go, because one single act begets another, which begets another, which begets many more. And then there's absolutely no way to calculate how far that single act that started the whole ripple actually wears out when it ends. And it likely never does. Who knows where it goes? And so Mr. Semnani founded this organization. And fortunately for us as an organization, he endowed the foundation with the resources that it needs so that we neither seek for nor ask for donations. And what's really fun about this is that's a statement that I make to schools, for example, when we go in and talk to an elementary school or any school for that matter, and we tell them all of the resources that we have, everything that we will bring to bear, anything that we will offer to do for you will be at no charge. And I say it to begin with. I have to say it somewhere in the middle. And then I usually end my presentation at the end with the same statement because they don't believe me. And they're always worried that the shoe's going to fall or there's going to be a catch. And they'll ask the question, so exactly how much does this cost? And we say nothing. And say, well, there's got to be a catch. There is none. There's only one thing that we're requesting, that is that you be kind and that you're kinder. We had a school principal the other day who said, so you mean I'm not going to have to sell cookie dough? No, I'm not asking you to sell cookie dough. You're not asking me to raise funds? No, we're not going to ask you to raise funds. And they are just thrilled that somebody's actually coming in instead of saying, we need from you in order to be able to do for you. No, we're just here to help you accomplish what you'd like to accomplish from the standpoint of a kindness initiative in your organization.
And that brings up the question. I think that's very unique that you're not, to stay afloat, nonprofit organizations need funding. And right. And the fact that this isn't constantly seeking outside funding is very unique. And allows you to just...
Yeah. So people are just always amazed that this is something we can do in this way.
I love it. And so you mentioned that you talk to organizations or schools and so on. How do you create engagement? And what is this mission to create this one kind act a day vision? And what does that mean? What does that look like? How do you create engagement with individuals and organizations?
That's a great question. So first of all, kindness is not a hard sell. It's a lot like gratitude. When we start to feel it, when we understand the whole concept of gratitude, then we feel a whole lot closer to it. And it's not that difficult for us it shouldn't be that difficult for us to adopt. But kindness, I'd like to say that people are hungry for kindness. The fact of the matter is people are starving for kindness in the world that we live in today and the challenges that many of us are facing on a day in, day out basis. So whether we're talking about a business or whether we're talking about a city, even if a religious organization or a school, we go in and we say, as one kind act a day, there are two things that we come to the table with. The first one is we can show you and your educational institution, here are the benefits that are going to occur when you start a kindness initiative. The evidence is reliable, it's science-based, it's predictable. And what's really amazing about these benefits that we can show you will occur, you're going to teach us about a few other benefits that neither you predicted nor I predicted in terms of what occurred as a result of this kindness initiative. So let's say we're talking to an educational institution. One of the things that we can tell you will occur is there's going to be a reduction in bullying almost immediately. You're going to see that almost instantly. Now, one of the things that we do related to bullying is we're not anti-bullying. We are anti-bullying. We support anti-bullying organizations, but we're pro-kindness. And so what we try to do is we try to teach the whole concept of, let's not teach the kids how to not be mean. Let's teach them how to be kind. So that's the first thing that you're going to find. The second thing that you're going to find is you're going to find that the student is going to have a better learning environment. The teacher will have a better teaching environment. The parents will start to feel better about the school that their kids are attending, and they'll be more supportive and engaging. So these are some of the benefits that you're going to find. And again, they're predictable and they're very reliable. But then the second thing that we do when we show up is we say, here are some best practices. Here are some successes that we've seen. Here are some things that we might recommend that you do. But far be it from us to tell you what you need to do for your kindness initiative. You know your organization, you know your students, you have your objectives, you have your goals, you know what some of the challenges are that you're dealing with right now. So what we would prefer to do is we'd like to come down, sit with you, and tailor make a program that is perfect for your organization, for your educational institution, for your city. And then let's run that initiative in that particular way. And when we do it in that way, not only do we find these new and wonderful ways to be able to accomplish what we feel like we want to accomplish, but we're able to do so in such a way that speaks to the organization specifically. And we have incredible results as a result of what we do in that particular way. And what's really fun is people are instantly engaged as we follow that method, so to speak. Far be it from me to take my curriculum, which is a square peg, and try and put it into the round hole that you've got. We can't do that. Let's make it work for you.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear there's two things that stood out to that for me. One is that you're not prescribing something on these individuals or organizations of this is the way you should, because that's not constructive. Right. People don't often like to be told what to do and how to do it. But when they feel the freedom to, then they're a powerful force for good on their own. And similar to that, when you talked about how you said there's two things that you'll teach these organizations or schools that they will see, is number one, you're not teaching them to fight bullying, for example,
right.
But you're teaching them to what?
To be kind.
To be kind.
Yeah.
Right. My wife and I talk about this concept a lot. So I want to see what your thoughts are on this. I believe that anytime we approach something with the mentality or even just the vernacular of using the words fight, all of a sudden we're pressing up against something and all our energy is going against the opposition, the opposing force that we're trying to avoid, than focusing our energy on the thing we wish to become.
So, it's a really great concept, because we were talking to a principal the other day and he had a really great point. It's unfortunately a school that has been relegated and has been kind of characterized as a school that bullies. When he arrived, he found all sorts of anti-bullying signs all over the school. What he found was that the kids were focusing on the word bullying and not anti. So he ended up taking down the signs. Now, let me make sure that I absolutely quantify. I am not against anti-bullying efforts. I absolutely support the whole concept and the whole idea. And there's some really great organizations out there that do a good job with this. But it was the same thing with anti-porn. He said to us that his son went to school, and all week they were talking about the dangers of pornography. And there were signs all over the place: fight porn, anti-porn, stay away from porn. And this, and the father, this principal, asked his son, how was school this week? He said, I saw the word porn a lot this week. And so he felt like, maybe there was an unintended consequence to the whole concept of, as you say, fighting against something in this particular way. I think there are proactive ways of approaching these things. There is, I have become a fan of the musical Matilda. And at the very end, these kids sing this song as they're done with the bullying, they're done with the abuse, and they're done with everything. They say, we are revolting children living in revolting times. We sing revolting songs using revolting rhymes. And the revolt, though, is a revolt against bad. The revolt is against the bullying and the abuse, but they're doing it by responding with kindness. And they're doing it by responding with good and positivity, and versus the plant your flag on the hill revolution type thing, and, on to the victory, and draw your swords and let's fight against this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that, and I believe in that, and I also appreciate how you recognize that the intent and effectiveness of some of these that may use that language, they have good systems and
Oh
so
yeah.
on.
Oh yeah.
Yet you show your belief in let's focus on being kind, and that will extinguish opposing
Right.
forces because
Yeah.
people's energy is focused somewhere else. That was an excellent example of that with the principal that took down those signs and focused elsewhere. Where could you give some examples of how you've seen success? Individual examples or organizational examples.
There are many. There's one organization that we're working with. It's a company. And what I really liked about the initiative that they launched was they have clients and they have vendors, and they're a financial institution. And they said to themselves, look, before we can even begin to consider the idea that we need to be good to our clients, we want to be kind to our vendors. And the really interesting thing about this is they recognize that most of their vendor relationships are friction-based relationships. In order for us to be able to get out of our vendors what we want to get, we have to go at it with friction, and we have to combat, and there's typically conflict, and they get theirs, and it's kind of a win-lose situation. And we want to change that paradigm for us. But in order to be able to do that, we have to be good to ourselves first. And so they launched an internal initiative. And the internal initiative is be kind to us first, and then we can be kind to our clients, and then we can be kind to our vendors. And so the first phase of that particular initiative was an internal initiative. Now, what happens in that is even though an organization feels like their initiative is going to have this incredible impact on within the four corners or the four walls of their organization, they find that someone says, you know what, my son's school really needs this really bad. And so they approach us and say, can we talk to you about my son's school? Or someone comes to us and they say, I've got a youth group at my church that we work with, and they could really use something like this. Or someone says, I'm the city councilman in my city, and our city could use something like this. And so even though the company was wanting to do something internally, they found one of the benefits that they realized was that they were having an impact in the community, whether they wanted to or not. They were having this impact in the community as people said, this is something that I want to adopt in my life. This is something I want to take to my home, right? And that's what we really want to happen. We don't care. We do care. We're not trying to prescribe how the home ought to look, but we do want these efforts to get into the home, whatever that home looks like, whether it's one person or many people, whether it's the way you see a home or the way I see a home. We just want it to get to the home, and that's what we see happening. So that's one example. Another one I'll give is one of my all-time favorites. And we had this beautiful school and the principal was a great leader. She is a great leader. The objective was 10,290 acts of kindness, okay, in 22 days. Well, these kids, they dove headlong into this whole initiative. And they had this wonderful way of registering these acts of kindness that they were doing with stickers all over the school. The school was just peppered with stickers. And when they were done after 22 days, 41,000 acts of kindness that these kids had done. And the principal says that they got a call from one of the parents. They said, hey, what's going on with my kid? And they said, well, what are you talking about? Well, he said, my son got up from the table and he took his dishes to the sink and nobody asked him. And I thought, okay, well. But then after that, he wrapped up the garbage under the sink and he took it out to the garbage. And I thought, what in the world is going on? And then when I went up to his room that night to say goodnight, his room was clean. And I said, okay, what's going on? And they said, we're doing a kindness initiative at school. So they called the school and they said, how long is this going on? They said 22 days. And the mother asked, is there any way you could do this all year long? Because my son has never done any of this stuff before. But again, what happens is we thought it was going to work. We thought it was going to have an impact in the school only, but it's having this wonderful, beautiful, amazing impact in the home, right?
Yeah, and this organization's been around only since 2022,
Right.
right? And so
Right.
you've been at this for 2 years,
Yeah.
but maybe not quite.
Yeah.
And maybe tell a little bit about how you ended up as the executive director of One Kind Act Today.
That's a great story. What's really interesting about this experience is in April of 2022, I was invited to the press conference announcing the founding of this organization. And I went just as an interested party. And as I was sitting there listening to the governor speak and business leaders speak and the founder speak, and they brought in a doctor who talked about the value of kindness to the human organism, I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is something that I would really love to get involved with. And maybe, I could work for this guy someday. I was currently at that time the CEO of a technology company. But then I took my T-shirt, and my yard sign, and I went on home and kept my yard sign up, and it was up a lot longer than I think most people would have left it up, because I was committed to the whole concept. And a year and a half went by, and then one day I got a phone call from Mr. Semnani, Khosrow Semnani. He said, "Can you come and talk to me about a similar but unrelated concept that has to do with some volunteering that I do?" And I said, certainly. So I went down and we talked for maybe 2.5, 3 minutes about that. And then he said to me, "Why don't you come run my One Kind Act Today campaign?" I said, I'm not looking for a job. He said, "I know, but I've done some research. You've been in the for-profit space. You've been in the non-for-profit space. I'd run a couple of international non-for-profit organizations and absolutely loved, the non-for-profit space and the impact that you're having and the sense of purpose and being able to wake up every morning knowing that you're likely going to be able to see a difference or help somebody make a difference in the world today." And he said, "So I know you've been in the for-profit, non-for-profit space, and I'd really like to bring you on as our executive director." I went home really actually thinking, I'm not looking for a job. And then my wife and I, as we got to talking about it, literally my wife kind of hit me up over the side of the head and said, "What are you thinking? This is One Kind Act Today, and you were at that press conference, and you literally said to yourself at that time, I could work for this guy." And so I came back and I said, "Did you know that I was at that press conference?" And he said, "No, I didn't know you were at the press conference." And so I actually pulled up a video not long ago of the conference just to confirm to him, yep, I was there. Can you see me right there? He said, I did not know you were there. I said, "Yeah, I was there." And so, yeah, let's figure this out. And so we did.
And that wasn't too long ago.
No, that was 6 months ago.
Wow. And we're grateful that you felt that need.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful I did too. And, I say it to a lot of people in almost a flippant way, but it's true. I'm a lobbyist for kindness, and what a great gig. What a great job. I get to go out every day and just try to help people be a little bit more kind on a day in, day out basis.
Well, my guess is that was part of your life and character, somehow learned and influenced long before this came along. And you mentioned your wife and her influence on you about stepping into this role. Maybe talk a little bit about how your family's played a role in your life.
So to this very day, I'm blown away. I'm amazed. I'm stunned. I've been married for 42 years, and when I say I'm amazed and I'm stunned and I'm just blown away, and I just still can't believe, even 42 years later, that Sherry Marie Bevel was her maiden name, agreed to marry me. I'm just blown away. It's just, I feel like I got the belle of the ball. And why in the world Curtis Bennett was allowed to marry somebody like hers, just to me, it's just one of those things that I wake up every morning incredibly grateful for. Part of the reason for that is because I grew up in a dysfunctional, broken home. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old, and when my father left, he was gone. And we had no contact with him, physical direct contact. And he was and I don't mean to be harsh, but it's just the truth. He was a deadbeat dad, and he didn't take care of his family, and he didn't take care of any of his obligations. When he was gone, he was gone. And so it was a challenge for my mom, and my mom struggled with a lot of different things. We grew up on welfare, and we grew up, struggling to figure out, we never went hungry, but there were days when we wondered if we were going to eat, and it was a challenge. And so my mom had a hard time keeping a job, and it was very difficult raising 4 kids on her own, and it wasn't super easy. But here's where the good part is. There was this incredible network of some of the kindest people that I could name to you by name that had such a powerful impact in my life. And I've often said that I do what I do because of what people did in my life, and really kind people who brought me into their homes, and really kind people who let me play with their kids when they wondered if this kid, Curtis, was a good influence or was he a bad influence. I think of some people who invited me into their homes or hired me to do jobs for them and paying me, probably 50% more than I was worth, and being frustrated at me because I wasn't doing a good job to begin with. And, but still taking me in and mentoring me and being kind to me. And so I feel like in many respects, Randy, I've got this incredible debt that I need to pay back for the goodness and the kindness that people showed towards me. Now, in the same light, when my dad did, I say I do what I do because of people who did what they did in my life. In the same light, I can't even begin to imagine in my life how I could ever perpetuate doing what my father did to me. And so one of the things that I made a clear decision on in my teenage years was I will never do to my kids what my dad did to me. I will never abandon my children. I will never leave them wondering. I will never leave them feeling like, they had less worth, and this will never occur. And so when Sherry and I sat down and we talked about marriage for the first time and the second time and the third time very seriously, one of the things we talked about very, very seriously was divorce is literally, absolutely, without question, not an option. It will never occur. It can't, because I cannot do that. I can't do that to my wife. I can't do that to my kids. I don't want to do that to my family. And so that was just one of those things. So I do what I do because of what people did, what they did. But I've tried to turn that into a positive in every way, shape, and form. So even if people were not necessarily bad to me, why would I perpetuate? If people were unkind to me in some, why would I ever perpetuate that? And I grew up being told that because you grew up in a divorced family, you'll probably end up divorced. And because you grew up on welfare, you probably end up on welfare. Well, I defy that. I think, why would I do that? Why would I ever do that? And so you're right. There's a lot that happened that brought me to this point. Some of it incredibly positive, and I'm grateful for those folks. And again, I can name them all by name. And some of it negative, but we had to turn it into a positive. I'd like to tell you who it is, but I'm going to probably mess up her name, so I won't. But she said something. She said, people, when they tell me everything happened, or you can, how does it go? Everything happens for a reason, right? She says, I don't believe that. She was a little bit more forceful in her language. She said, I don't believe that. But I do believe that because of my faith, I can make reason out of everything that happens. And I think that's what we do, right? We need to make reason out of everything that happens to us.
Yeah, and I've heard over and over doing this podcast, it's just kind of surfaced recently. So it's kind of a theme I keep hearing is that these experiences, life doesn't happen to us, but it does happen for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it's our opportunity to take and learn and create something out of it. And you talked about 5 years old, your dad leaving, your mom struggling. How many other siblings did you have at the time?
So there were 4 of us.
Okay. And younger than you, or were you?
So what was interesting about that, I am the second oldest child, and then there's a younger brother and a younger sister. But I remember people telling me over and over and over again, you're the man in the house. And so you got to be the man in the house. And so my first job I took when I was 9 years old, and it was a paper route, getting up at 4:30 in the morning to go do a paper route. When back in the old days, we still delivered papers door to door. But that was my first job. But from the time I was 9 years old, I can remember having a job and then contributing. When I was 12, a religious leader came to my mother and said, "It's time for Curtis to start paying rent."
Hmm.
And so I started paying $25 a month rent. Now, the next day he called me up and he said, "Curtis, I need a strong back and a weak mind, and you're my man." And he put me to work. And then he put the word out in the neighborhood that Curtis needs work. And so next thing I knew, people from out of the woodwork were calling me to mow their lawns and to pull weeds and to dig holes and to clean storage rooms. And I thought that guy's sole purpose in life was to work Curtis to death. We're going to work Curtis so hard he'll never see his 16th birthday, I thought. But it taught me an awful lot of great things.
And how did you feel about that at the time? Did you feel like, man, they're working me so hard, and it was tough, or did you take it and appreciate it? Or was that later that you learned to appreciate that?
No, I wish I could say that I had had the presence of mind to appreciate it at the time. Now, this particular religious leader, there were days when I really, really loved to hate him, and then there were days that I hated to love him. And but to this day, I am so very grateful for Henry Eugene Miller. I just think the world of him because of the things that he taught me. But I will say what it did and what it accomplished was when I go to Lviv Swenson's house, right? She'd work me hard, but then she'd bring me in for warm cinnamon rolls and cold milk. And I could see inside of her home what a real home was like. And when I could see what a real family, in my personal opinion, was a loving mother and a loving father and children, certainly with their issues and their challenges. And then when you go into Julia Yukatel's house and you'd see her, laboring over a kitchen stove trying to feed her 9 kids with a garden that's as big as, Texas out back, because that's the only way she can feed her children. You start to see some of the things and I'm getting emotional thinking about it, but you start to see, the things that are real in life. And, some of the ideals that you say to yourself, this is what I want. This is what I want to accomplish. And so, being in those homes helped me to formulate in my head, this is what I want. So I'm really grateful for that. But it would have never happened unless Henry Eugene Miller had put me to work.
Curtis, I want to tell you how meaningful it is to me that you're calling these people out by name and acknowledging that appreciation and how your life has changed because of them. And as you've said, I imagine that list is very long of those people.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't even begun.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised at the long list of people who put your name on theirs.
That's kind of you to say that. Very kind.
I know a couple of them because they introduced me to you.
Thank you.
So you talked about how people told you that you come from a divorced home, you live on welfare, you're probably going to be on welfare and probably get divorced. And you said to yourself, well, why? What was it in you that said, well, I don't have to be like that?
Because I was absolutely convinced that I didn't want this life to perpetuate. I didn't want to take this to my wife and children. And so there was just something that welled up inside me that said that you can do differently. Now, as I said, these ideals that I said to myself, if this can work in the home of Mark Glover, and if this could work in the home of Milton Fort and others, then by golly, I can figure this out and we can make this work. I remember one of the things that I think was probably one of the most significant statements that someone made to me is, Curtis, your mother struggled with depression. You've got other family members who struggle with depression. It's rumored that your father was someone who struggled with depression. You're likely going to struggle with depression. You might want to start seeing professional help now. You'll probably need medication to get yourself through life. And I thought to myself, gee, I don't know that I want to do that. And so I know that there are people who really need to find the professional help that they need. And I've got very, very dear friends of mine and even family members of mine who do need to take certain medications to help them through. And I understand that. And I think that's necessary. But somewhere along the way, I said to myself, no, no, I'm not going to do that. I choose not to do that. And there have been days when I probably would have said, maybe I made the wrong choice. And there were days when I probably said, I need to go find, the professional help that I need in order to be able to make this work. But I just made the decision that, no, I'm not going to do that. And that was one of the ones. I can choose to not be depressed. I can choose to live a happy lifestyle. I can choose to be. Another great author once said that we need to idealize the real and realize the ideal. I'm not an optimistic person. I'm an idealistic person. I don't think optimism has the strength to handle the heat of the day. Idealism, in my personal opinion, is a much higher standard. And when people say to me, be realistic, oh, I love that statement because it just burns inside my soul. It makes my blood boil. And when people say to me, be realistic, you can't do that, I think to myself, no, I'm going to be idealistic and I'm going to realize that ideal. I'm going to get it done. And so have I tried and failed? Of course, we all have. But I would much rather try and fail for the ideals than struggle with the realities of life. I hate the realism of the world. When someone comes to me and says, be realistic, like I said, it just gets my blood boiling.
I love that concept, and the way that you use it, realistic versus idealistic. I have someone who's taught me that Lee Brower is his name. He's actually been on the podcast, and he teaches that using a similar concept, but that arrival and arriving is dangerous. That's achievement, but thriving is what the goal is, and thriving is the horizon. We're always aiming at that ideal, which is the horizon. Now, we might arrive at stepping stones along the way, and those are achievements and milestones.
Right.
And that's the reality. We're arriving at those milestones. We're falling short along the way of reaching the horizon, the ideal. But darned if we aren't heading that direction.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the fact that we're failing along the way is often evidence that we have those values and ideals.
Yeah, no one arrives at a pinnacle without skinned knees. I mean, no one does. But the fact of the matter is, they just got up and they kept going. So, but I couldn't agree more. We don't simply just endure to the end. Scripturally speaking, when I talk about this, realistic people, Pharaoh said, you're not leaving. Okay. Goliath said, you're going to die. And we know what happened to both those guys. They both died. And so, realism, it just doesn't communicate to me at all.
You sound like you're not going to be one to be held down, and your life has shown that. Tell me about how you found success with your own family. You committed to your wife that says, we are going to stay together and we're committing to this for the long haul. That's the only option. Mm-hmm. And then you have kids of your own. Uh-huh. And how have you created the family that you have now and that you maybe wish you had when you were young?
So, and I may be repeating myself in terms of having made this statement publicly in the past, but I absolutely believe it bears repeating. I am not a perfect father, but I am perfectly committed to being a father. I've tried and failed. And I've made mistakes as a parent. I think my kids would agree when I make a mistake as a father, I try very, very hard to make sure that I can go to any one of my children or all of them together and say, look, I messed up there and I apologize and I want to try and be better. I want to do better. So I'm not a perfect father, but I am perfectly committed to the whole concept and the whole ideal. In terms of my family, there are devotions that we have in our family that I think were important to us. There were which were daily devotions, and they had to do with prayer, and they had to do with scripture, and they had to do with simple kindnesses, and they had to do with the way we talk and deal with one another, how they talk and deal with their mother. There were responsibilities that we had in our home that were all very important. But I think one of the things that I think my children do know, that independent of their challenges and independent of their choices that they make, there's one thing that will remain constant. Dad's not leaving. Dad loves them, and Dad is always committed to them. And I may or may not like the choice that you make, but that does not change in any way, shape, or form our relationship together as and my wife feels the same thing. So as parents, it doesn't change, and we still love you, and we'll still support you, and we'll still be there. And when you struggle or in your peaks and in your valleys, we're going to be there to help cheer you all along the way. That's one of the most important constants that any individual needs, whether you're talking about a child or even a parent for that matter. It's just one of those constants that I want my children to always know that they've got.
That's beautiful. I've heard another mentor of mine, Dr. Paul Jenkins, who I think you said he's taught me and my wife for years that we have one job as a parent, and that's to, other than to feed our kids, keep them alive, is to love them no matter what, even if. And it seems like that's what you've just described that you committed to.
Yeah.
And that you believe that they feel that that's true.
Yeah. And I think if you were to talk to my children, I think that they would say that. And now the beauty of it is all my kids are now married. They all married incredibly well. And we've now got grandchildren, and we're now taking that on to the next generation. And so one of the things that I feel an immense sense of, I hope, appropriate pride is that as I look now to this next generation, I see incredible health in those families. I see incredible goodness in them. I see incredible value in the things that they're accomplishing and doing. And what I'm grateful for is that one kid, thanks to a lot of kindnesses, was able to have that kind of an impact on this particular group. That's my nucleus. That's my core. And when I look at my big family picture, as dumbfounded as I am that Sherry Marie was willing to marry me, I'm equally dumbfounded that I've got all those kids and grandkids.
That's so inspiring. And I believe I imagine our listeners are inspired by this as well. And Curtis, there's so much. I know a few more things about you that we've talked about in the past, and that others that we commonly know have shared with me. And I hope that we can talk again and get into some of those things.
Love to.
I'd like to circle back to one kind act a day and close out with this of, I know you don't prescribe to individuals or organizations how they should, but you do help people come up with that. And so maybe give some examples of how can we spread kindness? What's a way that we can go about this and create our own method of doing that?
So it's not only a great question, it's a beautiful question. Not too long ago, I was sitting at a dinner table with a lot of different people, and they're wonderful souls. And we were talking about current events of the day. And we were talking about politics and wars and things as such going on. And at the end of the dinner, most everyone just kind of threw up their hands and said, "What can I do? There's nothing I can do." And I'll go back to what I said about Khosrow in the very beginning, the fact that someone said something has to be done and someone was willing. So a single act of kindness doesn't have to be monumental. It really doesn't have to be monumental. It can be something as simple as smiling at another individual. And then I've got stories about how a single smile has had a huge impact. It could be as simple as, helping someone with their groceries to their car. It can be very small acts of kindness. It could be a note. It could be a phone call. It could be just a pat on the back. It could be anything. And kindness is free, and it doesn't have to be monumental. We will have our moments where we will recognize here's an opportunity to have a huge impact in the life of an individual or in the lives of many individuals. Fantastic, great. But it's these single acts of kindness that can be that can make a difference. It's interesting. I've got a little sticker on the back of window of my car, and it says one kind act a day on it. And it's interesting how that has changed my driving habits.
Mm.
I'm a much nicer driver now because I've got this statement on the back of my car that says I'm a kind person. And so when somebody does want to wedge themselves in, okay. Or if somebody does cut me off, I don't yell at them or honk my horn or things. It's these little things that we can do on a day in, day out basis that can make a difference.
Yeah. So the first person that you may change is yourself.
Absolutely.
And then that radiates outward.
Yeah.
And you also have something on your website as well, where you're creating community engagement, where people make that commitment to themselves. And so explain that, what people can do and take this pledge.
Yeah. So one of the things that people can do just immediately is to get on thepowerkind.org and to take our kindness pledge, become a part of our community of kindness. One of the beauties about that is what we'll do is we'll send to people is twice weekly. We send a kindness prompt. It's just a kind quote, and it can come from any number of different people. And then just a little prompt. One of my dear friends sent me an email back, and one of the prompts was, scrape the ice off of a neighbor's car. She did that. She went and scraped the ice off a neighbor's car, and then she said she enjoyed doing that so much she went across the street and she went down the road and she scraped the ice off of like 4 or 5 or 6 cars. And when she was done, she was just as thrilled as could be. So that's one of the things that you can do. We want to grow that community and get people to be a part of that. And we think that's part of what our self-imposed mission is, to help grow that community of kindness all over the world.
Awesome. Well, listeners, you heard him. Go to thepowerofkind.org and sign the pledge. You can change yourself and change the world. I believe we're on the same mission, Curtis, you and I, where I believe gratitude can change and save lives. And it starts with ourselves by having that mindset of gratitude. So I've got one last question for you. You've expressed through some very challenging heartache and challenging experiences through growing up and living life and finding success and aspiring to ideals and so on, and people that you're grateful for, experiences you're grateful for. What does gratitude mean to you, Curtis Bennett?
Years ago, I read a quote by David O. McKay. It had an impact on me, and it's something that I've tried to abide by all my life. And in essence, the quote says that thankfulness can be expressed through our words, through mere words. Gratitude, on the other hand, has to be expressed through our actions. So if I'm really grateful, and again, I get emotional. If I'm really grateful for Jim Hatch, it's not enough just to say it. I have to show it. I have to show through my actions, my gratitude. Gratitude is next level thankfulness. And but it requires me to do something about it. So that's why I love the concept of gratitude. You and I can sit in our living room in our armchair and express thankfulness till the sun goes down. But if we're going to express gratitude, I have to get up out of that chair and I have to do something about it. That's what gratitude is to me.
Well, thank you so much, Curtis. The world is a better place because you're part of it.
Thank you. I feel the same
And
about
also,
you.
everybody else that's listening, we are grateful for you. You matter. We love you. We're grateful for you. Thank you for listening to the Sparks of Gratitude podcast. And if you liked it, please like it, subscribe, tell us what you think about it. It means a lot. And when you do that, it allows us to get more wonderful guests like Curtis Bennett. So we will see you next week. We love you. Take care.